Okay, we are live.
Hello, hello. Hello, Aviad.
Hey, Sagi.
It's always great to have you with us, and it's always a happy Thursday when we're announcing new things that are coming our way. So super excited for this one. It's very special for us. So I will give a small anecdote. Aviad and myself, to those who don't know, we met at Checkpoint, a cybersecurity company. Some will say that the company that ignited cybersecurity in the world with the firewall. So a lot of respect for that. And we've been dealing with a lot of developer enablement and enterprise readiness and all of that. But here suddenly, we deal with some of the more kind of hardcore security aspects, and that's always super excited to get into that. And that's exactly the type of atmosphere that we will get in this conversation. But first of all, Aviad, hope that you're safe in calling from Israel.
Yeah, I am trying.
That's
It's a different type of security features. Yeah.
exactly different type of security, and thank you so much for taking the time to present everybody what we're about to release here, and maybe let's start from a short kind of presentation. So let me know if you guys see my screen. Perfect. And we're releasing today something that is very relevant, and we're having a lot of conversations recently, and a lot of conversations with security folks that are trying to kind of get some control over this whole shift that is happening in the industry with the adoption of AI tooling and vibe coding and agentic workflows and MCPs and skills, and all of this mess that is happening. And we already know that there's some phenomena that are happening within organizations that concern API keys and MCPs and skills. I call it the holy trio of AI enablement, and we already see that it creates a mess. So we've witnessed a few of breaches that were detected, and a few problems that within organizations. Legit Security found out the issue with GitHub Copilot around the prompt injection and being able to kind of get exploit hidden malicious content in pull requests. Have to do with a lot of secrets that could be exposed externally. And we had the Microsoft Copilot kind of exposure that Lasso Security found recently with a lot of credentials that were stolen for GitHub and OpenAI and other systems. And Cloud Code is also, it's a massive adoption within organizations, small orgs and enterprises. But we also saw a few issues with that. Aviad, you're having a lot of those conversations, and I think that it's interesting to hear your perspective on it from the both hats, or the few hats that you have as the CTO, right? That is kind of in charge from one hand on making sure that everybody within the engineering organization are well enabled with AI tools and with development tools. On the other hand, you have the hat of the co-founder, right, that wants to move super fast, right, but also has this responsibility, right, towards the customers and other stakeholders. And also the third hat as somebody who's also needs to take care of the security within organizations, right? So you have many hats here, and I guess that you're not the only one. So how do you kind of see this whole major shift that is happening from maybe each and one of those hats that you have?
Yes, I think the first two hats kind of go together, because as a co-founder, you want to run as fast as you can, because that's probably, the greatest advantage that a startup has, to move fast and to change fast and to adapt fast. And with the revolution of AI, we are doing that with Fronteg. And the team is very into new technologies and bringing on new technologies. But every once in a while, we have a conversation where we say, "Huh, what did we just try to do?" And I think this is kind of what goes on in the industry. The impossible balance between security and fast pacing. On you don't want to break innovation, and you want to make sure that you are following on with your employees on bringing on new tools. They want to contribute. You want them to contribute, but you kind of need to be responsible of what happens. So sometimes I kind of think whether this is too much of a guardrails or whether this is too little of guardrails. So it's so hard to kind of convince. I think that the first kind of first layer starts with observability, of making sure that you see everything, and everything goes to a single point where you see everything, and you see everything that is happening, and then based on that, where are your weakened points. Once you see everything, you can define your security guidance. But if you don't have any visibility, you kind of don't know what to enforce, and this is kind of what leads me when I'm choosing a technology within the organization.
Yeah, fully agree, and I think that we managed to, and it took us some time, right? But we managed to find this balance. I think that a lot of organizations are looking for it and trying to find the sweet spot there, and that's what we're trying to do, to work with other organizations, share from our knowledge here, but also provide the tools. There's many problems that can rise. We identified 5 that we think that are super interesting and are super relevant. And I will not go like too much into deep on each and one of them, but you can imagine that some of them have to do with MCPs and skills and API keys that are being shared with LLM and the agents that are powered by LLMs, but also maybe 2 risks that are could not be perceived as something that is on the surface, but actually they are. Runaway agent. We've seen that agents are this kind of, I always say that they're very satisfying creatures that try to satisfy the need of their users, and they will try in every way that they can to bypass any obstacle on the way to achieve their mission. So sometimes you would see this runaway agent, I call it, right? An agent that has permissions to all kinds of stuff, and it just starts to kind of brute force their way into doing stuff. And because the scale here is huge, it gets more and more permissions. We saw obviously the OpenClaw phenomena, and the whole thing there lies on the fact that it has a lot of permissions, right? So this is kind of the we need a way to not only prevent through kind of predefined policies, but we also need a smart way to identify the agents and to kind of find a way to have this trust score, right? That we're talking a lot about, the trust score attached to the agent. And the last thing is also kind of related to that, the BYOA, I call it bring your own agent phenomena, where sometimes you work on your computer, you're connected to your own ChatGPT or your own Lovable, you start to build applications, and there's no good way to distinguish between agents that are connected to your private account or agents that are connected to your enterprise account. And once you have the permissions, it all becomes a big mess, and it's super risky to me, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So when we will talk more about this kind of topics, um, we've been asked kind of, okay, give us an example to real things that can happen. So I'm giving the MCP connector example where somebody goes, they need to connect to some data within the organization. If it's the main applications that we can imagine, so Slack, Notion, maybe other tools, Atlassian tools have good connectors out there, maybe public connectors, right? But let's say they need to connect to BigQuery or some databases, or tools, organizational tools that are not as advanced with their public MCPs. The MCPs are not guardrailed well yet, so they haven't invested in it. Then what will happen is that somebody will go and just download some MCP from the internet. Somebody solved it, and then you give the API key to this MCP, or you connect through OAuth2, and this is Aviad, right, where we see the problems start, right? When it's not something that is governed by the organization and is out there in the internet. For any application, you can find like dozens of MCPs that somebody developed. Give us the technical aspects of what those risks, where they can kind of happen.
Yeah, so first, let's tackle the first, there are MCP connectors out there. No one is kind of accountable. So first, it lies on the responsibility of the employee to kind of find a verified MCP. And as I mentioned, employees want to get things done. They do not, kind of think about security. So they need to find a secured MCP. That's given that they found a secure MCP. Now they need to deal with API keys. They need to generate API keys. They need to find a way to store these API keys. They need to store them safely because these MCP servers will work with client credentials. So you need to store these client credentials somehow. You need to kind of make sure that you renew them. You need to kind of make sure that they are safe. So that's the second one. And there goes the third problem of whether you are, even entitled to do such stuff through AI. So I always give the GitHub as example. So in GitHub, there is a great way in the UI to delete a repository. You have to go to 4 different clicks to actually make sure that you are actually, that you actually want to delete this repository. And the last step would be a step-up operation. If you put your client credentials into the GitHub API and just invoke a delete repository endpoint, the repository will be gone. There are no guardrails, there are not question asked, the repository will be gone. So these are new interfaces that needs to be kind of handled differently from the way that UI interfaces are being handled. And it's, in some cases, or most of the cases, I would say, it's too much on the employee to kind of take this responsibility upon. So these are 3 different use cases, and just, that we keep hearing more and more about.
Yeah, and I think it's real. It's not theoretical. We saw the COI security researchers that found the postmark MCP that basically posed as an MCP connector to the postmark email service, and they legitimately kind of took the postmark real MCP code, but in one version they added this single line that basically to any email that would go through the postmark server, it BCC'd an attacker's server, and we all understand what can happen. Then the attacker can get hold of every email that is going out through this server. So first of all, kudos for Koi for finding that out. But this is real. This is happening. Downloading MCPs that are not verified is a huge issue. There's a lot of conversation today that is happening around the future of MCP, but I think that de facto we see that MCP usage is growing within organizations, and even big organizations that are thinking about kind of adopting more and more AI are thinking about MCP as the layer that is going to be the governed kind of layer of connectivity between agents and applications. So I think that it's here to stay, probably along with other tools and other methods. And for me, it's just another connectivity method. Some will connect directly through APIs and consoles and whatnot, and some will connect through MCPs, just as APIs had several methods out there as well on the technical aspects. So this is at least the way that I see things. But these things are real and are happening. What I think that without further ado, we kind of this showed a bit of the landscape and how we see that. Aviad, show us what we're releasing today. It's super exciting.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk a bit about, a lot about security, security guardrails, and security features for Agent for Work. If you remember, we talked about Agent to Work. We presented Agent to Work as a tool to provide governance for employees and provide governance for security teams to make sure that AI adoption is happening safely within the organization and everything goes through a single endpoint, stepped up endpoint, approval flows, human in the loop, everything that AI these days needs. And we kind of brought into the conversation, a security champion and a security expert to kind of be able to talk about these use cases with us. So yeah,
okay, so would love to welcome Nir into this conversation. Hope that we can. Oh, okay.
There we go.
Hello.
You and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I'd like to apologize to the audience if I start running away like a little sissy. It might be because there's bomb sirens here, and I'm a little sissy, but both reasons. So apologies in advance. You
No
always gotta
worries.
apologize. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Keep yourself safe out there. I think that we see this feeling of this SaaS sprawl in the last decade, and autonomous agents. If like 6 months ago everybody were talking about what an agent is, what it is, whether it's ChatGPT, is it an agent? Today we're talking about agents that are going to work on them on their own. We're getting this in almost every conversation that we hear. Nir, so I would love to kind of hear from you as somebody who's a real enabler of AI and kind of, but also works in in an environment where you have to be very safe. Tell me a bit about how you see that the progress in the last few months.
Yeah. So you presented it really well. On one hand, I am a CISO of a payments company. Payments is a highly regulated industry, so we have a lot of regulation consideration: PCI DSS, GDPR, national regulators of payment schemes, Visa, Mastercard, etc. We have to be very careful about how we act. At the same time, you were talking to Aviad about how he's an enabler because he wants to put AI, as a CTO. I think that's just where almost every company who wants to be around and relevant in the next few years is at right now. So, and this is a difference because if you look at like the cloud revolution, which I guess is the last big revolution, though, that some of us, you can't tell, but I'm 62 years old. Yeah, I take care of myself. Just kidding. I'm 42, but we've been around. We've seen the cloud revolution. We've seen companies go to cloud. It was much slower. It was much more careful. The benefits weren't clear because it's like, management, IT costs. In AI, the benefits, the first time you use like cloud code and you ask them to write something, it's just so clear the benefits, and people are just blown away. They're just blown away by the imagination of what they can do. And also culturally, people grow up with robots and androids and Star Trek: The Next Generation or whatever your favorite show is. So everybody's like waiting for this robot revolution that we're kind of been educated to expect anticipate, and it's felt. So even in payments companies, even in banks, there's task force. Banks aren't even in the cloud, but they have task force in for AI, and you see it in the rounds that are being raised. You see it in the stock market. You see it, you see it everywhere. You see deals that even on-prem AI companies sign, and it's all going to one place. It's going to autonomy and just autonomous agents, because that's what you want. You don't want AI to be totally controlled and slow. And now, as a CISO, what's your stand? You can stop it for a month or 2 months, but then you look like you're not helping the business. Your competitors aren't stopping, or you can find ways to enable it. Now, then you go back to the age-old question of security. How do you enable without stopping? And the only answer has always been, from the on-prem days to the cloud days, now the AI days, is collaboration with partners who give you the guardrails. It's all about guardrails, and that's what I'm always looking for. I'm looking for to enable, because it's here, and I can either embrace it and enable it, or try to stop it until it overwhelms me. And once I accept it, I need to have the guardrails to be able to put the parameters. Now, where is the number one guardrail you want to put in? Okay, because you have to trust at some point. So right, you trust AWS and you trust. By the way, I don't know if you hear the crazy kids screaming in the background. I apologize to the
That's fine.
audience.
We're all
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, another byproduct of this dumb war. So, where is it in integrations? Because you have some trust. So you trust AWS, you trust Google, you trust OpenAI, maybe Anthropic. You trust their agents. You trust that they have some quality. You have to. But where does the trust stop when you want to integrate it, when you want to start controlling it? There you need to put really strong guardrails, and the integration is really the first step of being able to on one hand not slow things down, on the other hand have good control and visibility. And I think smart security teams that want to be compliant, that want to be able to show the auditor and have control and push logs to the SIM, and at the same time they don't want to be overwhelmed with 1,000 monitoring tools, and like this AI security tool and that AI security tool and that agentic tool. They need to look at the guardrails approach at the integration level, and to control, and just like you guys came from Checkpoint, that's a firewall basically. If you
Mhm.
are the firewall, then you can control the traffic. Once you control the traffic, you enable the traffic can flow through you, but you can also protect it. And I think that's what I'm looking for also in the AI revolution.
And if to be very kind of precise, we're seeing the risks with OpenClaw and prompt injection and all of that, and API key sprawl, and you know agents now, as you mentioned, become more and more autonomous and have more and more power. Uh, for you, if you take the security hat, what is this nightmare scenario that you want to guardrail against? What is
Uh,
the worst thing that can happen?
Yes. So what can happen is that you basically double, triple, quadruple your attack surface. So if you think about an endpoint, a MacBook, a Windows PC, and it has a user. Okay, so the user can get exploited. Of course, he can get phished. He can download malware. Nothing new here. It's one guy who probably works, in the average. How much does the average guy work? 6 hours a day. Being generous, right? 8 hours, 10 hours a day. And this guy who's like, an average guy, now he downloads OpenClaw or even Cloud Code, and he puts a remote control from his phone, and that thing doesn't sleep, it doesn't take breaks, and it's there, and it serves the internet for him, and now your controls are irrelevant. Your controls, because if he has access to his email, he could just tell Claude, like, every morning summarize my email and send it to my grandmother's hotmail, and then that's it. You got the data leaks. Your fancy DLP. Maybe you can block. Maybe if you're very, very strict, you're blocking all outbound emails. But then your organization, I'm talking like the average organization that doesn't have this kind of strict, like nothing out approach. So there are, classic ways to stop it, but a lot of like the kind of lower hanging fruit ways to stop it, like are just irrelevant. They're just irrelevant because you have another actor, which is not just like another person on the laptop. It's a machine on the laptop that is just nonstop on it, and this machine can be tricked. He can be tricked. That's what you're talking prompt injection. That's like phishing for AI, right?
Yeah.
He goes to a website for you, and now I think last week Anthropic came out with clouds for Chrome. So you install this thing, and now you have an AI browser, and now you don't know. And now, not only that, it's accessing all your internal tools as well,
Yeah.
simultaneously, all at the same time. You can do everything, and that's a big risk. I think generation one was like, oh, AI is going to leak your information to OpenAI or to Anthropic. I think security teams are like, okay, that's another big tech player. Just like I can leak it to Microsoft and put it on Azure, or I can leak it to Google and put it on GCP or AWS. Then yeah, OpenAI can see some of my information, and they have their controls. I think a lot of teams are. It's not that they're happy with it; they just accept it as like a SaaS thing that can have some of the information. I think the next step is the scenario is this kind of nonstop agentic that multiplies risk. By the way, also SaaS risk. Let's say we're talking about Atlassian, right? So you got Jira. Now, Jira has agents in their background, and the employees that maintain your code have agents. So everything just not even multiplies, just in an order. It's an order of magnitude bigger. I don't even. I'm too dumb to do the math here, but it seems like a big number, right? Because everything is just multiplied and multiplied,
Right.
and then you could be told maybe you don't even use agents, but use Jira. And Jira has Rovio, whatever they call it, and the guy who's working at Rovio has Cloud Code, and he puts OpenClaw, and then and the security team just can't keep up. So you got to start. First off, you got to take a deep breath, and then you got to start unraveling this. And the best way to do it, again, we go back to guardrails, checkpoints, et cetera, starting to put layers of control to all this cluster. You know what?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
Aviad,
don't know if you can cuss here.
thank you, Nir. And Aviad, we're talking here about protecting on the incoming kind of level of requests that are coming from the agents to get data, right? But it seems that it might not be enough, right? We're talking a lot about data for training, right? And how we ensure that basically the data, even if the request was legit, the data that travels back to the agents is not used afterwards,
Yeah.
for training or. So we're talking about another layer maybe of protection that Nir mentioned. Aviad, how do you see
Yeah,
that?
we can even talk about it. We are talking security. This is a security kind of based session, but even on the data privacy section that we are not kind of thinking about. It used to be an API that serves data to a web browser, right? A few years ago, or even 6 months ago. And now this API doesn't serve data directly to the web application. It serves data to an agent in the middle, and then it goes back to the web application. So if you think about it, Neil is an EU, can be an EU resident, calling an API in in Europe, and that holds a GDPR kind of data. But then when Neil does the same operation, same API is being called, but this time it goes through OpenAI servers in the States, it's different. Same goes for modeling, same goes for training data. Our data kind of flows now around where it used to be only firewalls in the middle or anything, but now it's been stored in all kinds of places, and we kind of need to take it into consideration when we are designing our AI kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, and let's talk a bit about identity, right? So we're an identity company for more than 6 years. We've seen all kinds of things happening with the identity issues within SaaS products, and we used to handle thousands or tens of thousands of incoming users, and here suddenly we're talking about magnitude of 10x 100x than that, with a lot of capabilities and a lot of also I would say advanced abilities to bypass identity checks by the LLMs, right? They're very smart. They can basically, say that they're anybody they want. And how do we handle identity in this age of LLMs? How do we even think about, who the agent is, and how do we define that agent? How do we know whether we can trust that agent? That's a conversation that is happening a lot these days.
Yeah.
Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sorry for myself. I feel we just figured out like human identities like a week ago, right? With like passkeys and like suddenly it's like I'm like, yeah, okay. You implement front end in your app, and you put some passkeys in there, and you're pretty good to go. Like phishing gets hard. There's a lot of control, and then you're like, okay, so I guess I can rest. And then like, oh wait, how about AI though? So I think it's not it's a different problem because it's not like the concept of identity, because AI, it's an objective based. It's not like a person with like a in identity they say what who you are, right? There's all the what, who, wow, right? You have to like prove a few things about you in order to get access. First off, AI can't prove a lot of those things, so it just irrelevant to a lot of let's say like kind of like security key, like a UB key or something, right? So a lot of the authentication controls are irrelevant, so it can't prove. And then it just the speed it works, a lot of rate limiting controls that you do for identity attacks are just it's irrelevant. And I really don't think it's solved, because we don't even know like how AI work is going to really look like yet. It's just changing really every week, every 2 weeks. There's a new capability. Like when the Anthropic Chrome extension really came out a week ago. So a week ago, anybody who had Cloud Code, which is it's really old, it's 2 months old or something, right? 3 months old. Anybody who had it would be like, oh yeah, but at least it's not an AI browser. And now I got like this week, I got like for like 100 requests in my company, because I also
Yeah.
manage IT. My helpers was swamped. Like, hey, open up the browser for us. We want to have an AI browser. It's like, okay, wait a second. So it's going to access all your SaaS apps, and it doesn't need an API key. It doesn't need like an OAuth token. It's you. It's on your session, and so it just which identity is that? I think these answers are still evolving, and I think it's almost like even foolish to deal with them because of that, because we don't know. Every organization needs to decide, do you want to take the risk? Is it worth it for you? Are the AI use cases going to solve your business issues and enable your business to make so much money it's worth the risk? Or are you risk averse and you want to wait a year, 2 years, 6 years? It's all about the company, right? But at the same time, there are things there are solutions. Like for instance, Agent Co. And anybody listening to this, check it out. Take a trial, and you're going to see that there's some things that as a security team, as an IT team, it's just taken care of already. And there's some things that are already like kind of stabilizing in AI. MCPs, for instance, connect agent or LLM to app connection. These things are pretty stable for about a year, but they're still scary to use. So I think today there are the guardrails that will let you have the visibility and the control that you need to push this in the organization. So maybe you don't open the AI browser because you're still risk averse, but you can't connect it to your BI app, your Power BI, your Tableau, whatever you use, or you can you connect it to your data lake or to anything else you want, because if you use a partner that has a lot of integrations and a lot of control and visibility, you can solve that problem and enable that. So it's really like the newer problems. It's you have to make a risk-based decision. Do I take the risk? It's not 100% solved. Do I try to work around it? There's some. It's funny to say older problems because it's only like 6 months old,
Right.
but that you can already have a stable solution, and you should definitely do that.
Okay, Nir, thank you so much, and you raised it for us to about Agent Co. So Aviad put his soccer shirt right? His soccer
Yeah,
hoodie, because it's kind of like, that's kind of like the training
that's the game.
for him. Yeah,
That's the game. That's the game we are playing. Yeah.
he's breaking records now with the amount of demos he's doing per day. So,
By the way, because there's a hunger for this. There's a hunger for this.
yeah.
The outbound hunger is crazy. Also for AI, I've never seen. I've never chased company vendors of Rapid like I chase AI companies, and I've never chased vendors like I chase vendors who help me put guardrails for AI companies. Because I think that those are the two things organizations need right now. They want the AI, power the LLMs, the good LLMs that will help them code and solve problems, and then they need the solution that will put the guardrails on top. And usually you figure it out. You put the LLM, it looks amazing. You're like, wait a second. So now anybody could do and you start like freaking out, and then you start chasing a Viad to show you a demo of his tool. You know what I mean? So I totally get it. I was one of them. That's why I'm here. Honestly, I reached out to Javier. I'm like, listen, man, I heard you're working on Agent Co. I need it like yesterday. And it's a true story, right? I'm like, just we need it yesterday because I got like 200 people waiting for access. It's going to be a mess. There's a lot of there's a lot of things that aren't relevant anymore. The way we controlled access, we need a new solution, and I think what you guys build is really that. And I look forward to it evolving to the next frontiers of agents. So we talked about browser-based control, and et cetera, et cetera. I really believe this is a new time, and just like cloud brought in CSPM and a new way of doing vulnerability management. I think you guys have a really good head start with integrations and your background to do that for agents. So I think we'll probably meet again in the future for the next cool thing, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, you mentioned browsers, right? Cool. So, Aviad, we heard browsers today a few times, right? So, cool. Nir, thank you so much, and you're welcome to see the demo of the new exciting things that we're releasing. Aviad,
Yeah.
so let's start.
Let's do that. Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Cool. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So quick reminder, Agent Co for work, the kind of use case. We have our customers bringing all their team, connecting their identity provider as a start. From that moment, they see all of the employees within the organization and the groups, and they're able to define which of the connectors they want to allow which and every one of the teams to use through AI. So more on the enablement side, which was Google Calendar and Google Drive, etc., and HubSpot. This is exactly what we do within the organization. And then, defining a policy of who in the organization can access what. So for example, HubSpot we allowed for marketing, we allowed Google Calendar for all of the employees, and the use case I just talked about with GitHub. So we allow GitHub for all of the users, but in order to delete a GitHub repository, we are requiring an approval. So we've seen all of this, and then the flow is pretty much straightforward, going, connecting on the side, and then list my Google Calendar events for tomorrow evening. It's gonna run the connector for Agent for Work, searching the relevant tools. Calling the tool, and it's gonna show me the events that I have for tomorrow evening. Okay, so I have finalized the week and family dinner, which I cannot miss. So let's see what kind of guardrails that we just talked about with Neil we can add. So there is a new section with the Agent for Work called Security Policies and Guardrails. We got plenty of requests from different customers of ours, to add more and more capabilities of guardrails. Once you connect that connector, right, so any employee can connect to it, the employees that you specify that can connect to it. But the question is from where and when they can connect was another question that we kind of put here. So the first kind of limits were around IP and gear. So I'm able to specify IP restrictions. So for example, let's go here. I'm going to define a new IP restriction rule. And for the sake of the demo, I'm going to just say allow from 10, 10, 10. Now, Sagi, we don't have to do anything. Once you specify that, all of your connected users, okay, will be applied with that specific policy. So how about my events for Sunday? So we're going to call the tool again. And if that should work as I expect, we are blocked by organizational policy. So we don't require the users to re-authenticate, or these policies evaluate on runtime for each and every one of the requests, okay? We can go back to the monitoring section. Okay, so we see this was the previous MCP call that we execute for the calendar list, but now we see that Claude is facing an IP restriction block, facing that for that specific Claude user coming from that specific IP, and that was me. So same goes, for that for IP restriction. I can do the same, for geofencing. So now that let's say that I allow only connections from United Kingdom. Going back, try to fetch again on Sunday. The tool is going to be called again. And as I mentioned, we don't need to reconnect. These tools are executed on runtime, and these policies are executed on runtime.
So this way, if you have different compliance kind of methods that you need to apply, you can set them up by the country and by access to which code.
Correct.
Even define combined kind of policies, right?
Correct. So we saw the geofencing, but yeah, let's say that we want to go even granular than that. So, everything that I show here is kind of on the global level of the organization. So this geofencing will say you can only connect from United Kingdom, or if you set up the IP restriction, you can connect from that specific IP restriction. So, let's say that we want to bring it into the granular level of of that specific policy. So for example, if I can always go to the policy level and can say, for Google Calendar, for all of the employees, we kind of set no targeting, okay? So it's allowed for all of the employees, but we can say that it's allowed only if they come, from United States or United Kingdom. So you can always define it on the connector level. You can go to the tool level. You can go to the user level. So, these policies are kind of higher, based on a hierarchy.
Got it.
Yeah.
And how granular is this for users? Because we know that, if you look at different departments, different users, they have different behaviors. So can we also set it up in department or user level?
Yeah, sure. So, let's say that we want to step up for GitHub, okay? We want to step up GitHub users coming from China, okay? So we're going to create that policy. We're going to apply it for Sarah and Marcus. Let me save that. And we're going to say only if Sarah and Marcus are coming from China. Okay. So this will apply only if that GitHub operation is being done by Sarah or Marcus from China. But, you can say the same thing that, block GitHub if coming from, name a country, Sagi.
Let's pick Israel.
Israel. So we're gonna block GitHub operations for specific users coming from Israel. Now you have to choose the user. So you're gonna block me, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
I want you to rest. It's from good intentions.
So blocking, yeah, so we're gonna call it blocking Aviad GitHub operations coming from Israel. So you can totally set it on a granular level.
That's awesome. So what we saw here are a few things. So first of all, we can see that we can set up security policies in kind of those, main behaviors and restrictions from IPs, from geographies,
Time of work, for example,
work. Yeah. That's amazing. Very useful one, and we get that a lot. Tell us a bit about the allowed agents, kind of, and what because we're hearing a lot about identifying the agents and which kind of agents we trust and which kind of agents we still want to block because we haven't onboarded them properly within the enterprise. We hear that a lot. Tell us a bit about that and maybe where we're at today and where we're going forward with this whole identifying the agents and controlling them.
Sure. So, on the allowed agent side, we kind of faced requirements from specific customers to kind of determine how data should, flow within the organization. When you think about organizational data, that organizational data is going through specific, DLP, and you kind of sign, a contract with Anthropic. You sign a contract to make sure that your data is safe with them. So, and if you're not signed with ChatGPT, etc., that means that your data can just flow to that organization. So you want to make sure that you specify the policies on whether, that agent is allowed within an organization. You can just go and say, I'm allowing Claude for all of the employees within the organization. And if you did that for Claude, only Claude will be enabled through the organization. The idea is to do that. We kind of bridge in few technical.
Yeah. So I think that we might have some technical issue. Yeah, so we dropped Aviad, and he was just about to show us some of the other capabilities. So sorry for that, and hopefully he will be back in a second. I think that one of the interesting topics that we are talking about is also the prevention kind of aspect. So we are handling here a lot of the aspects of connecting and connectivity and enablement. And one of the things that we get asked a lot is how you can also prevent some of the things if somebody decides not to kind of participate in this method that we're providing to the organization. And I think that one of the things that we will present in the upcoming weeks is another release that we're doing. So we got a lot of great feedback on Agent Shield, which we released a few weeks ago for the OpenClaw use case. And obviously OpenClaw is getting more and more traction, but Cloud Code is being used within the organization, within most of the enterprises. And we see both engineers using that and what we call the citizen development is also happening. So Cloud Code is also required to, we're required to monitor it. Aviad, hope that all good, and welcome back.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry.
I was just sharing that we get a lot of requests of, okay, what is happening if somebody decides not to participate in this kind of safeguard that we're providing, and can you maybe tell us a bit? I know that it's still not in the release, but tell us a bit about kind of what's coming next, and give us maybe a sneak peek into that.
Yeah. So if we talk, at least about the agent and the agent behavior, so yeah, we are able to kind of define, going back to the allowed agents and the agent identity, we are stitching a user identity into a specific agent and a specific user behavior to that agent. So based on that, we're able to mark signals on how a user is behaving through this agent. And when a user goes abnormal, we are able to define, whether we are stepping up this user or blocking up this user. So everything with that regards is already live and running. We are going very deep here in that scenario, just to see how that behaves again.
Mm-hmm.
Show the entire screen. So I'm gonna connect to.
I think that we can't see your screen yet. Okay.
Can you see it? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna connect, my agent for work to my cursor. That will be connected. No. Let's log into that. יפה הטלפון שלי. Yeah, sorry about that.
It's all good. Take your time.
Okay. So I'm trying to connect Marcus through their Okta. So Marcus is now going to be connected. I'm going to try the OTP. Okay, so there is Marcus right over here. I'm going to go and see how Marcus usually behaves. So if we want to go to Marcus, so that's the way Marcus usually behaves, 700 calls per day. These are the days per week and the activity per hour, and these are the tools that Marcus is usually calling.
So we're building this profile of usage
Correct.
for a user and the agents that they use.
Correct. So I'm going to go and try to operate agent for work. Specifically for cursor. Okay. Trying to connect the MCP again. Okay, so for some reason, I don't know, the MCP is not connecting for me. But we are generating this abnormal behavior and we are able to step up this user based on that policy, so for the security policy. So right over here, oh, I know why it doesn't connect. Okay, so we just checked that the allowed agents feature is working. So cursor couldn't connect because our allowed agent is only Claude. So let's delete that.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, and now we should be able to connect. There we go. Okay. So asking now what are my Google events for tomorrow.
Okay, so basically what's happening now is that Cursor is trying to connect
Cursor
to...
is running the code because it detects an abnormal behavior. It triggers a step-up operation. If we go to the monitoring logs, we're going to see an action that was triggered. I'm going to search for the anomaly log right over here. And we see that this section for Marcus is triggered as anomaly on a medium score, specifically coming from Cursor. And we can see that it triggered the step up as well.
And I think that this is interesting because we're not talking about identifying only when users are doing something, but also if you let Cloud Code or Cloud Cowork do their own work, right? And they start to do these activities on their own. We're all seeing again like OpenClaw and the autonomous agents that are starting to rise. You really need to find the patterns in a quick manner and react immediately. So you cannot foresee everything that is happening that might happen, right, with the user. Maybe it was easier from before because we were talking about, okay, we need this dynamic anomaly detection only if the user gets hacked, right, in the past. Now
Correct.
We're not talking about, getting hacked. We're talking about runaway agents that just because they're very smart and they're trying to do something, they can start to create a mess in the system.
Totally.
Yeah. Awesome. So we were talking about kind of sneak peek. So tell us what's coming next.
Okay, so yeah, we have, maybe I can provide a sneak peek in the 2 minutes that we got left, but we are working on protecting the 3 layers. So we talked about observability of what, users and employees are doing facing an MCP gateway. We talk about guardrails for that MCP gateway, but we kind of neglected the 3rd level, which is what employees are doing on their computers, personal computers or corporate computers, and what skills they are running there, and what is the damage there. We are all aware of OpenClaw, etc. But same stuff can happen with Cloud Code. So I'm just going to share quickly how my system is kind of built.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I have my Claude over here. I can run Claude, trust the folder. I can do, pretty much whatever I want with Claude. I can load skills. I have one skill loaded over here as well, my front-end design skill to help me design stuff. But if I want to kind of protect that Claude code, it's kind of, again, going back to the developer to kind of do it. So actually what we did is we launched an Agent Shield. So remember that we launched Agent Shield. Now we are adding support for Agent Shield specifically for Cloud Code. So I'm going to sign in with SSO specifically to this Agent Shield. Going with my corporate, organization. I'll log in from the Okta again.
So you don't have to use Frontend as the IDP. You can use any organizational IDP.
Any organization IDP as same as the other products for Agent Co. Any organization IDP we are connecting to. So now, I'm logged in as the administrator of Agent Shield Cloud. I can generate specifically, let me just revoke these. I can generate specifically an install command for my employees. I can send it over to them.
And it could be also auto-deployed by an MDM, obviously.
This is deployed by Jamf Cloud, Jamf, whatever MDM that you have, you can just ship it. It has an installation token. Now I just installed Agent Shield on that computer, and now I can just do Agent Shield start. So MDM usually does the Agent Shield start as well. I'm gonna run it. And the daemon has started. Okay, so Sagi, any idea what happens when I try to run Cloud now?
I don't know. It seems like you shouldn't be able to do that, or it should pass through the shield, right?
Yeah. So actually now, because of the policy within the organization that Claude needs to be shielded in order to run, in order to mitigate risks, I have to kind of log in into that. So now I have my Agent Shield running. I can just go to my Agent Shield. Nice UI, log in into that, and ask Agent Shield to shield my Cloud code. So basically what happens here is that, we are taking control, we are locking Cloud in a dedicated user environment and dedicated NVM, and we kind of make sure that every access to the file system by that specific Cloud code will be filed through the Agent Shield. We keep track of network access, we keep track of file system, and we allow the administrator of the organization, okay, to specify policies. Okay, for example, here the different policies is to kill Cloud code for any for any non-shielded Cloud code. But then you are able to specify what items in file system can be accessed or what items cannot be accessed, or what is the allowed, for example, URLs that this Cloud code can access as well. So it allows the administrators that work with Agent Shield Cloud to kind of inject policies and to make sure that even if they are protected, the side of the MCP gateway, still the endpoints are being protected. So we just shielded our Cloud. Okay, I'm gonna open it from a nice project that I have over here. I'm gonna click Cloud. So that project has an .env, .npmrc, okay, nothing fancy over here, and a front-end skill, so I'll connect my browser. So we have our URL right over here. You just see it. I'm gonna open my URL, allow, and we are, sorry, I needed to paste the code. Authorize, copy the code, and we are good. So, Saki, there is a way to run all kind of stuff, but just to emphasize how strong this is, I can try to access the .env file within the project, but it has permission denied. We are not allowing file system to sensitive files. We are not allowing file system to NVMRC, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we will allow readme.io. Okay, but anything around that. And the Agent Shield will be available over here. And you can see that the skill that I have over here is quarantined. We are building a repository of skills, but that's the main idea that we are launching. It's going to be very cool and going to play with the entire ecosystem of Agent Core for work.
Super exciting. Wow, that's a very interesting sneak peek, and thanks for doing that. I think it raises a lot of appetite for the next releases. Amazing work. I love the design, by the way, of Agent Shield. It's very security oriented and interactive. We presented some incredible stuff. I think that a lot of them are already in use by kind of the early adopters of the new capabilities. And I encourage all of the organizations that want to enable agentic development and AI development within their enterprises, within their orgs, to try out agent.co. The setup is super quick, and you can enable AI development through agent.co in a matter of hours. Aviad, I know that it's challenging with everything that's going on, but I really appreciate the you joining and presenting everybody with everything. And thanks for Nir from Rapyd, who joined us as well. Very interesting discussion. I'll see you on the next release with some exciting stuff that are coming.